Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the Albany Street Plaza here in Lower Manhattan in New York City. As you know, New York City is slowly reopening. Broadway, the jazz clubs, as well as the restaurants are now back in full throttle, and it hasn't stopped music fans to come out and support the arts during this COVID-19 pandemic here in New York City. Recently at Poisson Rouge, pianist as well as composer and educator Vijay Iyer played a sold-out crowd performing music from his current CD, Uneasy, which is on ECM Records, which is his seventh for the label. And I had a chance to sit down to break bread with him to talk about his trio, which features the great Tyshawn Sorey on drums and Linda Mahan O on bass, as well as talk about this composition called Tempest, which he performed a couple of months ago at Prospect Park for Brick. This composition was a myriad of jazz, classical, as well as hip-hop and spoken word. And it is a reflection of all of the issues that have been going on during this pandemic. And we also had a chance to sit down and break bread to talk about the great Ambrose Akinmusire, who for 50 years has spearheaded ECM Records. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the great Vijay Iyer and his trio, live at Poisson Rouge, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. Vijay, I want to start off by offering my condolences to you and your family, but I also want to say congratulations to this trio and this music that I heard at Prospect Park back in August. I thought at a time when I thought I was not hearing a lot of protest and social music of what was going on at the time, you guys took me on a 2-hour journey that was just remarkable, man. How long did it take you to put this music together?
It took me, I guess, like about 3-4 months to piece together these little fragments for that project called Tempest. A lot of it was about, once I settled on who would be involved, that was a big part of it, which was like, I wanted people that I could channel with, you know, people I trusted who could just bring their intuitions to the moment, tap into the forces around us and express that, you know, in the way that they do. And so I was lucky to have this incredible group. So once that was in place, then it was about trying to just figure out how to bring out the best of everybody, you know, and set up spaces for them to just be themselves. Yeah, and then knowing also that we would not get to rehearse much. So then I was thinking about like what can we do that will just click into place without too much preparation, and that will also just offer some spaces to conjure. So that was the idea. So it came to me little by little. It was a very intuitive process, and I'd say like probably the last elements of it came together as my father was in the hospital. So thank you for your condolences. He went in about 4 weeks before we performed.
Wow.
And so I was like kind of trying to make sense of everything at the same time. Like the possibility that he might either live on in some severely injured, disabled status, or that he might no longer be with us. And either one was like so overwhelming that it put me in a very raw and like vulnerable place. And so then I just, I just was like, when I got to work with those guys, I was just so real about everything. It's like, look, I don't have much to offer right now except this bare version of myself. And they were all right there with me.
I mean, you have Tyshawn, who's part of your trio, and you have Ambrose, and you had there is a myriad of hip hop, spoken word. I mean, you knew how to channel in on the nuances of what was going on right now, because all of this, I mean, we're all watching this in real time for the last 14, 15 months, and I know that there's a saying, the pen is much mightier than the sword, and I heard that, you know, for those 2 hours, man. Did you, you said this music was written in fragments. Did you have like some things inside that you really wanted to say that you couldn't do musically, but you could do it in the spirit at the same time?
Yeah, I think it was, what they asked me to do when they invited me, the invitation came almost a year ago. They wanted me to be part of, this is like back last fall. They said, we want you to be part of Celebrate Brooklyn next summer. And we're not sure if we'll be able to, we think we'll be able to perform by then, to have performances by then. So maybe what you can do is create, as part of your set, you can do something that commemorates the pandemic, commemorates those loss. I mean, back then it was still only 6 months in, right? So then as that kind of sank in, and as things changed but didn't change, and especially like when you look at who's been affected most by the pandemic, it's communities of color, right?
Yeah.
And it's the so-called low-income nations. I can't believe that they can use that phrase to apply to a nation. Like,
and it's funny, not to cut you off. It really became down to socioeconomics for this whole entire pandemic.
Yes, and what that really, as we know in the West, that aligns with race very directly.
Yeah.
And that's like been the, that fact has been around for a long time, before the pandemic even. Inequality is racialized in the West because capitalism is racial capitalism.
Right.
It's like, this is like I said that night, this is a 500-year-old pandemic.
Right.
So that's what we're really dealing with, is the pandemic of white supremacy and the many lives lost, the many lives taken, and the ongoing impact of that history on the present. So but then in a way that's too much to say in music, it's just kind of, so instead I made music that was as open as possible so that we could just really commune and channel that. And just be, and it's partly like, it was Ambrose, it was Aruj Aftab, it was Moor Mother, Tyshawn, Daryl Johns, and myself. And all of them have a certain intense critique in their artistic vision. So that's kind of what I wanted to just feature. Give space to that the intensity of critique and the purity of expression. And that it's not about like political music. It's actually just that what is even what's the reason for expressing yourself in the first place? What is this refusal to be silenced? What is this insistence and this defiance? What is that already animates you as an artist, and how do we bring all of that to the fore? So that's really what we were doing. So so it was like there was too much to say, and not enough time, not enough rehearsal. But then you just like let people be real, be as authentic as they can be. So I knew that we would have like these axes within the group. Tyshawn and I could always lay down some rhythms. Daryl really stepped to the plate. That was my first time performing with him, actually. And
how did he come into the fold? Because Daryl is such a very busy guy.
He's a beast, right? Well, what's funny is that I don't know. Well, I remember I was doing this large ensemble project 8 years ago, and Mark Shim was playing with us. The incredible tenor saxophonist, and he said, there's this bass player who really wants to play with you. This is in 2013, so he was a kid. I mean, he was like 16 or 17 years old. And so I kept his info, I kept him in mind, and then I heard him around town a lot, and on albums and stuff. I heard him with Wallace Roney, which was incredible, and I heard him with of course, Emmanuel Wilkins on that album with Emmanuel's and his band, all the live stuff he's done. Yeah, you just really don't do that. It's like maturity that's pretty astonishing for someone as young as he is. And just super solid, very creative. He also has an intensity of his own. So yeah, I mean, I felt like I just sort of like tapped into my, what I learned from people like Amiri Baraka is how to hear the person in the music.
I miss him.
Yeah, I miss him too. I think about him every day. It's almost his birthday.
Yeah.
Libra season. Yeah, so that's a big part of it, hearing the person in the music, in the play, hearing who they are through the ways that they express themselves. And that's, so I tapped into that skill that I learned from people like him.
this trio is exciting. In fact, our first 2 times that we spoke, you had Stephen and you had Marcus, and now we're transitioning with this trio that you've had for a couple of years now. And what is it about this core of musicians now at this part of your life that has transformed you musically and sonically? What are these 2 musicians doing for you right now?
It's funny, I've worked with both of them for so long. And I still also work with Marcus and with Stefan, so it's not like that's all finished or something. It was more that, like, as you know, I've worked with Tyshawn for more than 20 years.
Right.
I mean, like, a lot. We've worked together a lot. We've played all over the world together. We've taught together. We've learned together. We've been through all kinds of stuff together. And we've made a bunch of albums. Played each other's music, So I feel it's like family, actually, being with him, playing with him. And so I always feel like whatever we do is going to be cool.
Right.
And then, like, one time we were up at the Banff Center where he and I were directed for several years. We co-directed this workshop up there in Canada. And we had Linda Mahan O as part of our guest faculty. We had her up there year after year, so we got to play together almost every year that was happening. And there was one time where we just did a trio set, just for fun, to like blow off some steam, for the student. We just played for the students, and that was just 2 years ago. That was in August of 2019. We had played as a trio before that, but that feeling that day was new. It was a new feeling for me. And it's still hard to describe it, actually, for me. But I think there was just a sense of commitment and this aliveness in the rhythm, playfulness and creativity. They're both incredible composers, band leaders themselves. So it was another one of the situations where I don't have to really say much of anything. And the music just starts, and then we're just in it together. And that feeling of like mutual, just like a real collaborative spirit, and that the music will just have its own life, just like, it just felt like this is I want to document this. And I said right after we played that night, I said, hey, you guys want to make a record? And then a few months later we did. That's what this is. That's what Uneasy is. It's the album we made at the end of 2019.
Right before all of this broke out.
All of this.
It's crazy. I'm listening to this album, and you pay tribute to a fallen soldieress, Geri Allen. And we don't talk about Geri that much. Geri was a young lion. She came out during the 80s, and she made a very important mark musically and as an educator. What was it that stirred you to play her composition on this album?
Geri has been a leading light for me, a guiding artistic spirit for me since I was a teenager. I'm turning 50 this month, next month. So like I'm saying 35 years that she was in my ear. And I remember like some stuff she did in the 80s that really captured my heart when I was just beginning to like try to figure this out. When I was a teenager. And I was like so astonished by what she had to offer as a creative visionary. She was just such, like, compositions were like intricate genius, works of genius, and then her playing as an improviser was like nobody else. I mean, you can find elements that connect her to Andrew Hill and Herbie Nichols and Thelonious Monk. And then there's a lot of stuff that she did that nobody did, and that people are still catching up to. So when she passed 4 years ago, I was lucky to get to know her quite well, and she was very kind to me. She gave me a set of drums.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have her drums in my house, and she was just very generous always, and very supportive. And so there was that whole phase that she had as a nurturer, as a kind of, a teaching, a guiding spirit as a teacher, not just as this like you said, young lion, like this new force on the scene. I remember those like stuff she did with Ralph Peterson
Yes.
in the late '80s,
Yeah.
another fallen soldier.
Yeah.
Like that was just unbelievable to me. Trio, triangular, and then the quintet stuff with Terrence and Kenny Garrett.
Yeah.
Man, unparalleled.
Yeah.
And the way she functioned in that group, she was so unbothered. There was like all this fire around her, and she would play these very elegant and mysterious spare solos that took my breath away. But then, like who she became in her later years, like as an educator, as a community force, as a nurturer of other artists, and as just like a supportive, very spiritual person, a very deeply committed, loving person. So that person, that was always there, but that's the person I got to know for the last 20 years, And so I find myself constantly paying tribute to her, both for the impact she had on me musically and the human being that she was. And I'm still realizing that hardly any of us have really studied music, in any deep way. So I've been trying to address that for myself. Yeah, so after she passed, I got enlisted to perform at these different tributes. I played with a bunch of people at her funeral, and we played at Newport that summer when she was supposed to play with Esperanza and Terry Lynn.
Right.
So they had me and Jason Moran and Christian Sands all like try to fill her shoes. The three of us together. So like each of us tried our hand at it, and Terry had me play that song, drummer's song.
Wow.
So that was like, I had heard it many times, but I'd never really studied it enough to play it, And it's hard, man. It's hard. And she was so nonchalant about it. The way she played it, it was like, yeah, no big deal. This, I'll do this.
Right.
It's like there's all this sort of misdirection going on where she's doing she's covering a lot, but she makes it sound easy. It's not. So anyway, that's been a lesson for me, just like internalizing that piece. And I'm gonna keep playing music and keep studying it, keep thinking about it, talking about it, assigning it to students. She's an endless inspiration. We were just so lucky to share the planet with her.
Yeah. Vijay, this pandemic, we lost two very important piano voices. We lost McCoy Tyner at the beginning of this.
That's right.
And we just recently lost Chick Corea.
Yeah.
As a pianist, what do those two men mean to you? And explain to my viewers. I have. In fact, I ran into Christian McBride last night, and we caught up, and I asked him about Chick, and his take on it was just profound. And he told me that he's still trying to wrap his brain, because I told him, man, you played your best shit. Excuse my language. You did.
That says a lot, because he's played a lot.
Yes, he's played with a lot of some of our.
This guy, Sonny Rollins.
Yes.
Yeah.
But both these pianists McCoy brought a different style, but Chick brought a lot of music. What do those two guys mean to you?
Man, McCoy Tyner was such a visionary, a real inventor, in the sense, like, what he figured out that the piano could do. I don't think anybody else could have discovered that in that particular way. The power, the resonance, the colors, the velocity, so like the depth and the speed. I guess all of that together, and the spectrum of emotions and energies, and the groove, and the blues feeling in it, the blues quality, and all of that music of his search for peace.
Yeah.
Then, of course, like, so much of it was born in the context of him playing with Coltrane and Garrison and Elvin Jones. Like, a lot of, he was quite young when he started playing with those guys. Someone asked me, who's your favorite young pianist? I said, McCoy Tyner in 1961. Because listen, man, there's no one at that age, like 20 years old, doing that. It's one thing, I'm going to start crying. It's one thing to eventually discover that, but it's another thing to already be there at age 20. And a lot of it was the necessity that he experienced, like, being in a group with those guys, the force of it. Like, what was the way to play that would be open enough and strong enough and mutable enough to accommodate that rhythmic intensity, that melodic intensity, that sonic intensity, And that's what, and like one thing that he said that Coltrane really appreciated about him, which is not often, when people say, oh, play McCoy-esque, or like Tyner-isms or something, they usually are talking about the harmonies and the lines. But really what Coltrane appreciated about him was his rhythm.
Yeah.
Because that was, what did he say? We were, what's that quote from him? Like, Jimmy and Elvin and I, we were like pistons in an engine that would support that whole machine, So it was about the way that they locked as a rhythm section. And his role in that is so important. It's not just color. It's rhythmic energy in a very, very focused way. So that's like something that I, finally answering your question, that's something that I have keyed in on as much as I can. Especially playing with someone like Tyshawn, or a few years ago I got to play with Ralph Peterson, to like anchor yourself with the drums in this very specific way that lifts up the time, that strengthens the rhythm section. That's such a key part of piano playing. It's not just about voicings and lines. It's really about that. we're called a rhythm section,
Right.
not a chord section.
Right.
You know? So that's like one major thing for me that McCoy brought to the fore. Like he really strengthened the rhythm section from the piano chair in a way that is hardly, basically it's like, to me, it's an extension of Monk, actually. Because it always has that dance quality in it. That groove, that bounce, that thrust.
It's crazy you say that, because everyone, when he passed away, the reference point album is that Atlantis record that he did on Fantasy, I think in 72, Exile. I mean, but I have so many favorite McCoy Tyner records.
No, I mean,
it's just, everyone says that's the one, but there's
not
some,
one.
there's not one. There's about 4 or 5 records I could name.
Yeah.
Now, Chick Corea, and I said this, he left us a lot of music.
A lot of music. Very much so. And he covered so much ground. It's easy to forget, actually, because there's so much of it. And it's almost like, wait, how is that person also this person?
Right, right.
I mean, Herbie is the same way, still out there touring. In fact, he's playing tonight at the Hollywood Bowl.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought about going, except I have a gig, it turns out. Yes, so, I mean, because like my first exposure to him, actually, first of all, like him playing with Miles Davis at the Isle of Wight.
That's a crazy concert.
It's nuts, man. But he was running the Rhodes through the ring modulator. I think it was a Rhodes. Either a Rhodes or a Wurlitzer, but he was running it through a ring modulator, so everything he did was out. Like, no matter what he played.
Right.
It was just like super raw, super dissonant sounding, just because the timbre was so like, whoa, is that even a note? What is that, There's that, and then like Circle. The band Circle?
Yeah.
Anthony Braxton, Chick, Dave Holland, and Barry Alshaw.
Yeah.
Some early ECM stuff live, especially the Live in Paris concert. That Chick goes in on that stuff, man. The way they play Nefertiti, There Is No Greater Love.
Right, right.
And then some Braxton compositions that have like diagrams for titles and stuff like this. It's like super. It's just unbelievably intense.
He was an intense person as a composer,
Yes.
and his bands were intense.
Yes. Because it would be like at length and in depth.
Yeah, yeah.
But then, and then like it was after that I actually was when I started playing with Marcus, when Marcus was a kid. I met him when he was 15, and he's like, do you like flat rides? Like the ride cymbal that his grandfather Roy Haynes played on Now He Sings, Now He Sobs.
Oh my God.
Like literally that was it. That was that symbol. He's like, do you like the symbol? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh yeah, it's on that record. Oh, it's that symbol. So that was when I kind of tuned into the earlier, more lyrical, I guess, side of him. And in between, I'd also like checked out a lot of his compositions, like the stuff he did with string quartet, duets with Gary Burton, and Return to Forever, of course. Like the first version.
I mean, just
the energy, man.
Yeah, like, and
so
it's funny. I got to interview Chick and Stanley for the reunion tour and I did a piece, I think a 7-minute piece for WBGO many years when they did the reunion. And Chick wrote these songs for these personalities. I don't say musicians, I say personalities, because if you listen to the Dave Weckl and the Patitucci stuff, those personalities could reflect the music that they were doing. If you listen to the Vigil, those personalities reflect what he was doing. And I don't think there are too many musicians that can do and dissect music for personalities, not a band, but personalities.
Yeah.
What's your assessment on that?
Well, that is actually the tradition, though, when you get right down to it. Especially when you have a working band that's gonna like open up this music over lots of shows for years, you know. So that's when you are, you know, it's like getting back to when we started the conversation with that group that I unveiled this last month, Tempest, which was like, sometimes you have to be able to hear speculatively and imagine what it will be like for this group of people to come together. And then you think like, well, first of all, I truly believe that anybody can play music together given time, but you want to give them something that will set them off, you know. Just showcase them at their best.
I just recently interviewed Joe Lovano, and he's now in his second record with ECM after his long tenure with Blue Note, and he described Manfred Eicher as, when he's producing his talent, it's like when you're recording, it's almost like when you're in a recording setting, it's almost like playing a concert. Describe working with Manfred, because ECM has produced some very important jazz recordings over the last 50 years, and you're part of that legacy now.
Yeah, it took a while for that to sink in, because like I remember like when I first got the vinyl Break Stuff and Far From Over.
Yeah.
Because like when I first got into this music in the 80s, I was a teenager. I was like 14, going to the local public library and checking out LPs. And a lot of them were ECM LPs. Not all, I mean, I also got a whole bunch of things on Columbia, like Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Thelonious Monk, and different things. But those ECM LPs, they had a sound like that became like a defining sound. And then like 30 odd years later, I hear myself in that sound, and I was like, I had like an out of body experience almost, because it was unreal. It's like, I don't know, like some part of me always feels like I'm still learning, I'm still on my way somewhere. I'm still piecing it together. But then to have that sort of like definitive moment, like, oh, I'm part of this now. It's hard to take in, But I've had all kinds of different experiences with Manfred, because I've now made 7 albums for ECM, and some of them he was involved every step of the way. Some of them, like this one, because of the pandemic and because of various other circumstances, he actually was not there for the recording or the mix.
Wow.
That was new for me, because he's always been there for at least one of those things, if not both, all of them. But this time, I had a ticket to go to France to mix this album with him. It would have been in April of 2020. And we were like, well, let's wait and see what happens instead. So we postponed that, and we're like, yeah, I don't think this is going to happen, man. But let's try to get this album out soon, so maybe I could just mix it here. And we'll just keep sending you mixes and see what you think. And so that's how we did this album. We mixed it here with Ryan Streber at Octave, that's where we recorded it. He's done a lot of, mostly classical recordings, actually, contemporary classical music. There's an incredible piano there, and so that was like, in a way, like, it was astonishing that we found someone who could pass the Manfred test, who would like somehow be a suitable, because all the other sessions I had done were with James Farber, who has worked with Manfred for I don't know how many decades now. In fact, like being in the studio with the two of them was like being around an old married couple. Because like they hardly say anything to each other, but it's all vibes. Sometimes it's really harsh, and sometimes it's really like they're in such sync, So, and Manfred's very hands-on. He knows a lot. He knows about all of everything that's involved. He's out there placing mics. He's adjusting the reverb, and hands on the faders and everything. But when I came on to ECM, I'd already made like 17 albums.
Right.
So I wasn't like, oh, what does this do? I was actually like pretty aware. So we could actually kind of meet. He's done like 1,700 albums, I don't know. But like, at least we could meet artist to artist, and I didn't feel like I was being managed. I actually felt like my opinions mattered. I could have a point of view on what I wanted, and that was like very much accommodated. And then, yeah, like, I would just say also that, like, there's not one sound, you know, because if you listen to the whole range of those 50 years of music, like Mal Waldron, Free at Last, Lester Bowie, Brass Fantasy, or Avant Pop, remember that record? Or like
the guitar guys, the guitar stuff.
Yeah.
John Abercrombie to Pat
like,
Metheny.
Yeah,
I mean,
8081
yeah,
record.
yeah.
All the Jack DeJohnette special editions.
Yeah.
Or Cadona with Don Cherry. Wadada has 2 albums on there.
He knows what he wants.
Ensemble. Then all this classical stuff like Meredith Monk, Steve Reich. You know, it's like, it's a huge range. None of them sound the same, actually. So there's not one like ECM sound. It's actually, it's what the music asks. So I feel like I've been able to make the album sound the way I want them to sound. And, you know, if you can make a case for it, he hears it. Because he's an artist too. That's how it's been. Yeah, it's been a nice run. 8 years now.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the Albany Street Plaza here in Lower Manhattan here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank and congratulate the talented Vijay Iyer for his time. Make sure you go out and support his current upcoming tour, as well as buy his current CD, Uneasy, which is available on ECM Records. You can order on Amazon.com as well as CD Baby. Also, I'd like to personally thank the staff and management of the Poisson Rouge. For more information on upcoming showtimes, as well as location, please visit them online at www.lpr.com. Also, people, like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on YouTube and Vimeo, as well as visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.